thank you for joining us here at the Times Center and also to our viewers on the web. Hi, Mom and Dad. I'd love to start with a question for one of our Broadway babies, Miss Cicely Tyson.
Babies? Not in this life again.
Cicely, your first Broadway show was in 1959 in Jolly's Progress. What was Broadway? What was Broadway like back then for you, and what is it like now?
Well, as you said, it was my first. I was young in every respect. I was understudy to Eartha Kitt. Oh my God. And I was terrified of her because she never said a word to me. She never spoke to me one time. And so I just assumed she didn't even know I was there. But I had heard stories about stars and their understudies and what animosity develops between the two of them for reasons unbeknownst to me. In any case, one day I was standing outside of her dressing room and she was having a conversation with someone. And I heard her scream, "Oh, Cicely! Oh, she's fantastic!" I didn't even know that she knew my name. Right? And later on, of course, we became great friends. But that was my initial introduction to being on Broadway. Yeah. Now, after 30 years of being away, I am having the time of my life. I think I have the gift of one of the most incredible roles ever written for a woman, especially a woman, an elder woman. And I'm just loving every moment.
I'd love to talk to you about the challenges and also the fun of the work that you're doing this season. What are some of the challenges that each of you is finding in the work? You've all done theater, both on Broadway and off, a range of different plays. What are you finding, in the work that you're doing now? Maybe Jessica,
well, it's such an interesting question because I think that Broadway, for me, because you understand the number of people there and the finances and the hope that it's successful, that you really want to entertain. You want to tell people this story. And then as you progress through a run, you realize how you can sort of guide people to what you think the meat of the story is. And it's such an amazing experience. Our play has a tremendous amount of humor, and then there's this, in my mind, this very spiritual, very deep aspect to it. And so the challenge is to give them this great time and then almost corral them to what you hope they ultimately walk away with. And it's like I think once you do a play for a while, you have this consciousness of what you want to give. And it's much more, I think that sense for me is more significant on Broadway because the house is huge and then you start off feeling so big because you're filling this house and then you insist on making it deeper, and it's like that's the whole process,
And I would add to that too, because Jess and I are doing this play together, that we have a living playwright, one of our great living American playwrights, Richard Greenberg. Yeah. And so it's really important to find the ways to serve him. And instead of just going outward all the time, we find ourselves going deeper and getting deeper into the material as we go along. And I think one of the other challenges that I find is that because there's such a big responsibility in terms of, and we were talking about this, all of us backstage, about what it takes to do this over and over, 8 shows a week, that we find that we have to find the times where we rest ourselves so that we're really taking care of ourselves so that we can keep giving out what we know is our responsibility to the work, to the play, and to each other. Absolutely. And I would say that that's some of the challenges, as well.
Maura, you and your co-star and lucky guy Tom Hanks are creating a portrait of a marriage over many years in a series of scenes.
And many wigs.
Many wigs, right. There's some serious big hair early on in Lucky Guy. How did you go about sort of creating your character of Alice and this marriage?
It was it was George Wolfe was our director, and it's just interesting because we did not have the good fortune of having the playwright. So
Nora Ephron had passed away.
Right, and when you were
earlier.
talking about the challenges, that was an interesting one, and that I know I'm not exactly answering your question, but it's part of it in terms of what was written would sometimes work and sometimes not work. So there was a lot of wrestling just with the actors in terms of there was a great deal of respect for Nora's words. So neither George nor Tom were just going to change it. So if something was a little bit challenging, it was just about trying to find a way to make it work without any kind of adjustment from the writing. So that, in some ways, was very frustrating. But in other ways, it was sort of liberating because it was about what was going on between us as much as or more than the language.
In Vanya and Sonia, you are tilting between comedy, drama, pathos, satire. There's so much going on in that play and in your performance. I was curious about just sort of negotiating all of those tones and moments that Chris Durang has created.
Well, you know, Chris gives you such fullness to do each to the fullness of it, if I can say that. I mean, he says, go out on that limb, cut it off, hit yourself on the head, and get back up. You know, and I love that about his writing. It's very brave. He goes very far. And in this play, I think very deep. But to reference a little bit of what you were talking about, we were very lucky in that the play was commissioned by the McCarter Theater in Princeton, and we all lived out there. And it's like the old days. I felt like being on the road. You know, we all became a family. We all ate together. We all, it was so much a part of the rehearsal, and it's so rare. And I cherish that very much, because I know economically what you were talking about. It's very hard, and it's hard in New York because everybody wants to get home to their real lives. You don't socialize as much. You don't get that out of town, oh wow, this is really fun. And we got to do that in Princeton, and then at Lincoln Center, we got to be more intimate in that very intimate space. So we changed the style a little bit more. I think things that were a little more comedic and huge became smaller and more intimate and deeper. And then Broadway. And we really got to focus it because we went back to a proscenium. And for comedy, I'm telling you, thank you.
Why is that?
Yeah. Because doing a thrust is a very different ball of wax.
Yeah. Why is that?
Well, Anne was written for proscenium theater, which is that it's, as you all know, it's in a frame, which means that everybody sees exactly the same thing at the same time as they hear it. You're playing in a thrust. You got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 angles. And you can't just, you have to keep, including people as you would at a party. And you remember that. I did that. And do you remember when we did that? It was like, oh my God. And I played this in 6 cities where it was proscenium. Pam, pam,
All
pam.
proscenium?
Always. And then suddenly this.
Coming to New York.
Hello, big difference.
It does make, and it's wonderful because that even makes you feel more of a family, more of a team, because everybody's working for the same laugh. And I love that. Or the same sadness. You know, there's a real wonderful juggling act, and I love that in the theater so much, that we have each other. That's all we have out there. And the audience, and when we can throw the ball back and forth to each other and build to these wonderful, you were just saying with your great cast, you know, it's so much fun to play with each other every night. It's great.
So this has been a very good year for women in plays on Broadway. Strongly written and defined characters, great performances. But I'm sort of curious what it's like on the inside for you. Do each of you or some of you feel more good parts are being written for women than ever, or is this just a lucky year where there are some good roles or really smartly cast revivals?
That people are writing parts for women that express that a woman has this value
Well, because women have evolved themselves.
Yes, yes.
That's the reason.
Yes, and those revivals, of course, were written mostly in an era where that wasn't the case.
Right.
Yeah.
But a lot of people say that to me about your character after the show. The excitement that they feel about a woman being in that position, that your character is in that position, that she is so loved by this younger man, and how much that means to them. And I do think that playwrights are writing more for women and older women too. And I find that very exciting. And it's happening more in the theater, I think. And I think what's happening is that television and film is picking up on that as they begin to see that.
Are there other examples of that where you've rescued a co-star or they've come to your aid like that? I mean, even in a moment with, I don't know, with a line, with a Miss Tyson.
Well, I had an incident where I was appearing in a show and I was rehearsing for another show. And I went to the theater that evening after rehearsal in the second show that I was preparing for. And I had a similar movement in both.
No.
In the play that I was performing in, I was standing on a ramp that was 6 feet into the air. And the character that I was playing opposite of was standing on the foot of the stage looking over a cadaver. And she said something to me, very insulting. And I dashed off that ramp, and I looked at her. I suddenly realized it was the wrong play. I looked at her and I thought, you can't say that line. It's the wrong play. So, but the line wouldn't come, right? And so I stood there staring at her, and then I did. Threw my head in the air and walked away. That is a moment I will never forget, and I promised myself never to rehearse another play while I'm performing. Oh my God.
But there's this genius thing that happens when our play perhaps is the short, we opened about the same time, so we probably have had a similar moment in which you realize, oh, I know the play and I can help them. But what happens early in the run, like the first couple of weeks, there are these moments where we had pauses, unintentional pauses, where people didn't come in or people didn't say something, and there's no way to help them because you're so fixated on what the director has told you to do that night that you're only thinking, I'm not supposed to chop the carrot. I'm not. But the genius thing that actors do, what happens first is, you're thinking, who the hell has gone up? Even your favorite actor, you're like, she's betrayed me. And then comes the moment you get past it, and you're all like back now waiting for some other entrance, and you're standing backstage, and there's that moment when they say, I don't think the audience knew. Now, how did the audience know? There is a lengthy pause in which someone very flatly says, like, where's Shelley? It's like, moronic, how could they not know? It's a play of complete poetry. No one says, where's Shelley? Right? It's how we fool ourselves. And you say, no one knew.
A friend of mine was in the Porgy and Bess, and he would be upstairs playing, you know, during his intermission, playing cards or chess or something, and someone ran up to him and said, Warren, you're on. He dashed down the steps and onto the stage in the middle of the quiet. Oh! And he stood there. He said, I absolutely froze. And then I walked backwards. Oh, no. Until I got off the stage, and he says to the stage manager, do you think they saw me?
I missed an entrance once in my career, and I was about 2 minutes late.
What was it?
What?
I've never recovered from it. And I was late for Nancy Marchand.
Oh, was it
And we
the
dressed
cocktail hour?
and we dressed in the same room. Well, it was the family was on stage and they
Were you
improvised.
doing children? Were you doing that related?
No, cocktail hour. And they improvised.
Oh, my
They- well, it probably wasn't as long as 2 minutes, but we were in the Globe, and there were several theaters in one hub building, and I had stepped across a hallway to visit a dog. And I had many little short scenes, and I thought I had finished the one with the dish towel, but I hadn't finished the one with the dish towel. And so I'm just visiting with this dog, getting some dog love, and suddenly I hear, the door opens and you hear the loudspeaker in the hallway, Holland Taylor to the stage. I went through walls. I came out on stage like this. Then Nancy Marchand and I dressed together. We were sneaking down the stairs after the show, and I felt a presence behind me. And it was Nancy, and I hastened into the room where we were alone. I sat at my table. I could see in the mirror her sitting at her table with her back to me, and I'm just, doing whatever I'm doing. She's lit a cigarette, and she looks at me with a squinting eye with the smoke, and looks at me in the mirror and says, "Next time you're in a play, stick around."
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. That is beautiful.
Oh.